I'm Harrison Thompson. I'm here with Bob. Me and Bob do ministry inside of Washington County Jail. And we do run across certain situations that children are faced with. Today, I wanted to just talk to him about trauma. We want to get straight to the point. We don't want to waste time here. So, Bob, what do you got to say about trauma with these children?
Well, I've been involved with the juvenile justice system for about a dozen years.
Okay.
And you've been at it for, what, 3-4, I think?
Yes.
And between the two of us, we go into the Washington County Jail, and we try and do life skills classes, and more importantly, we do Bible studies to try and bring these young people into a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. There are certain fixed patterns that we've seen over the years, and I probably sat in front of close to 2,000 kids, and you've sat in front of hundreds, I'm sure, by this time. And several things have emerged that are almost fixed, one of which is virtually every one of these kids is the product of a broken home.
Okay.
And they do not have both natural parents living in the house. And the second part of that pattern is they're all, and I hate to use the word victims, but frankly they're victims of public education. And the reason I say they're victims is because our public education system does not teach kids how to think. It teaches them what to think.
I agree.
And it's more indoctrination than challenging them to use their mind and learn how to process through things. What that has led to in virtually every one of these kids' lives, and what I'm convinced is the reason they're now in there and in trouble with the legal system, is every one of these kids is traumatized. I don't believe you can break up a household without traumatizing your children and damaging them. And when you pile on top of that trauma, one trauma after another, there's a point where these young people check out.
To the point where you can't recover.
You cannot recover. Trauma triggers grieving, and that's a well understood process, and it has certain stages of negotiation, denial, anger, depression, and finally acceptance. And we have to be able to process through those stages. When we can't process through, we end up getting stuck. And that's where you end up with problems with depression, problems with anger, problems with denial, where a kid will put on a mask and act out in a way that's not natural to him. It might be the bully on the block. It might present itself in other ways. But this is all related to the fact that these kids have been traumatized and they have not been able to grieve through that process to find a place of acceptance and healing. And the reason they don't grieve through it is not because it's anything wrong with them, but before they have an opportunity to grieve through it, they get hit with another trauma.
So let me ask you a question then. How do you fix a situation like that? Is there a way to fix it?
There is, and that's what we want to talk about, and we'll be talking about it, I think, in depth in other video segments. But the first thing is to understand what's happening. And what happens is you're traumatized, and that's going to trigger this grieving process. So the first part is to understand that grieving is normal. The anger, the negotiation where you're trying to, and the way the negotiation works with a lot of these kids is if there's a divorce, they end up blaming themselves for their parents' divorce. As odd as that sounds,
I see
that's a pattern.
I see
They think, if I could have just been a better child, if I could have done this different, if I could have done that different, my parents would have divorced, or they'd come back together. That's part of negotiating. They're negotiating with themselves. If only I could do this or be this type of person, right? And another aspect of that would be anger, and then you act out in that anger. These are natural parts of the grieving process, but you have to be able to continue to move through those until you finally come to a place of acceptance to the fact that your life has now changed.
And in some reality, you won't get that from being in the jail system. So where do you go to get that kind of help? I mean, can you? Where do you go?
Well, what happens is, before they're, and some people are well adjusted enough. In fact, most of us innately are well adjusted enough to deal with one trauma at a time. It might be a death in the family,
Okay.
a job loss, or
Gotcha.
whatnot. You grieve through this and you move through the process and come to that place of acceptance. The problem is, while you're grieving through one trauma, you get hit with another. And you can't grieve through that till you get hit with another. So picture yourself, your parents now divorced,
Okay.
your world is turned upside down because
Yes.
that's a nuclear family. Now you're ending up moving. That's
Okay.
another
That's
adjustment.
another one.
That's another challenge to your status quo. Then you end up changing schools and having to get all new friends. Okay. Now your father's moved 2 states away, and so you don't get to see him except on summer vacation or whatnot. That's another trauma. That piece of your life has been removed. Okay.
Yes.
Now your mother has a boyfriend move in.
Oh yeah, I
Now
agree.
you have a surrogate father who's not really your father, and he's got a couple of kids, so you've got you've got new siblings to try and adjust to.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
And so this, what happens is we're dealing with one trauma after another, and you don't have time to catch your breath and grieve through it. It's okay to hurt. That's what trauma does. It hurts. And that grieving process helps us deal with that hurt
Right.
and come to a place of adjustment and final acceptance where you now you realize that your world has changed and you're not happy about it, but you're okay with it because you've come out the other side stable. But you can't do that when you can't grieve through the first trauma before you get hit with 3 more. And that's what we're seeing in the jail.
Yes.
And what happens then, you get stuck in one of these stages of grief. You might have problems with anger, depression, where you want to harm yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And you can't get the pain to stop because you can't work through it before you get hit with another one, right?
Right. I'm agreeing.
So what happens then, sooner or later, you check out. You stop solving problems, you stop grieving through, and what you end up doing is you find a way to manipulate your mood to get the pain to stop. So what I've seen in virtually all these cases where these kids are traumatized like that, sooner or later they run to drugs, to sex, to thrill seeking,
Yep.
to injuring themselves. I had one girl a couple years ago, she was cutting herself.
She's a cutter.
Yeah, and I said, why do you cut yourself? She had a 1-word answer: ecstasy. By inflicting pain on herself, that was apparently less painful than the world she was living in, and it gave her relief from the focus on all that grieving and all that trauma. And the problem is these young people don't realize what's happening. So to answer your question on how do we deal with it,
Yes.
with this, the first thing is we have to recognize what's going on.
Okay.
We need to recognize that grieving is normal.
Okay.
You get hit with a trauma that rips your world apart, and it's going to hurt.
Yes. I agree.
And once you recognize that, then you can begin
Healing.
hopefully dealing with it properly. Now, if you're going to get hit with one trauma another, and an example of that would be sexual abuse in
Okay.
the home, which happens.
That's tough.
And that's ongoing. How do you escape from that and give yourself time to heal and to grieve? Okay?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Yeah, and these are all tough things, so there's no quick answer, but the first answer is to recognize what's happening. Recognize that if your world is turned upside down, it's going to trigger this grieving process. Recognize that you're going to be bouncing between these stages of negotiating, trying to figure out how to make it go away. An example of that would be, let's say that I'm a high school kid and I just got dumped by my girlfriend.
Okay.
Okay? And I think, and I want her back.
All right.
Okay? And I think, if I was an athlete, a football star,
Right.
that would attract her
I
back.
would attract her back.
Okay? Or if I was more outgoing, or if I was funnier.
Okay.
So you try and be these things to thinking that that's going to attract the girl back, okay? And what that is negotiating. You're negotiating with yourself in your head, thinking if I do this different, or if I do that different, I can reconstruct my
Yes.
world.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
The problem with that is it doesn't work, because you're not dealing in reality.
Oh, so
I could become the best
reality.
athlete in high school.
I like the reality thing.
Well, and the problem is that if I become a superstar football player, that doesn't mean my girlfriend's going to come back. She probably dumped me because she doesn't like me.
That's true. That's true. No, I know what you're saying.
And so you're not dealing in the real world when you're negotiating, okay? And it has to do, but you're going to bounce back and forth between these different stages, depression and sadness. You've just been dealt a loss, and that's going to trigger sadness as well.
That's right.
And
right.
that sadness could evolve into depression if it triggers a chemical imbalance in your mind at some point, and then you're really stuck, okay? So what happens is you need to recognize these stages, that they're normal, and make sure that you're processing through them and you're not getting stuck. Anger is a huge one. You know,
Yes,
most
there's
of these
a lot of
kids,
anger in a lot of these children.
and they're triggered. You know, and once you have an anger issue, certain things will trigger that. And what we mislabel is the fact that the triggers are not the causes of the anger. The cause of the anger, the root of the anger, is the trauma.
Good.
And once you have the anger issues, there are certain things that are going to trigger it. But the actual outbursts are a symptom. That's not the disease. So it's important to recognize what's going on and start getting at the underlying issues. Follow me?
I'm following you. I'm following you.
And so the first step is to recognize that you've been traumatized. It's
Yes.
going to trigger this grieving process. The second thing is to recognize these stages and make sure that you're not getting stuck. I mean, you're going to bounce back and forth between sadness and negotiation.
Yes,
denial,
yes, you are.
and that's going to happen for a while as you process through. But the point is not to get stuck in one of them, and not to get stuck with an anger issue, or not get stuck cycling through depression for the rest of your life.
And in reality, when you really boils down to it, you can build nothing out of anger.
Yeah.
You can build nothing out of depression. There's nothing positive in any of that.
That's right.